while you wait 2 seconds for your coffee to be approved. The world's banking systems are doing more math than it took to put a man on the moon. Tonight, we're going inside the machine. We're going to explore the largest payment system ever built in human history. An invisible network that processes more money in a single day than most countries produce in a year. And I have to warn you right now, by the end of this, you're going to look at your credit card very differently. You're going to understand something that most people, even most bankers, never fully grasp. Something that makes even trillion-dollar bank transfers look like simple handshakes compared to the incomprehensibly complex machinery that actually moves money around the world. If you enjoy these deep explorations into finance and the hidden systems that run our world, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to keep making content like this. Let's begin with something familiar. You're standing in a coffee shop. You order a latte, $4.50. You pull out your credit cards. It's a small piece of plastic, maybe metal if you're fancy, with your name embossed on it, a 16-digit number, an expiration date, and a little chip embedded in the corner. You tap it on the reader, or maybe you insert it and wait for the chip to be read. There's a pause, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3. The screen says approved. You take your coffee and leave. That's it. Simple, instantaneous, unremarkable. But in those 2 or 3 seconds, something extraordinary just happened. Your card didn't just communicate with one machine. It triggered a cascade of communications across multiple networks, multiple companies, multiple countries potentially, involving dozens of computers, hundreds of security checks, and trillions of dollars worth of infrastructure. Let's trace what actually happened. The moment you tapped your card, the terminal read your card number from the chip. It also read additional information. Your card issuer, the type of card, security codes that verify the card is genuine. All of this happens in milliseconds. The terminal then packages this information along with the transaction details. The merchant name, the amount, the date and time, the terminal ID. It encrypts this data package and sends it. But where does it send it? This is where most people's understanding ends. The terminal is connected to the internet, usually through the merchant's Wi-Fi or a dedicated payment line. The encrypted transaction data travels to the merchant's payment processor, a company that specializes in handling card transactions. Let's say it's a company called First Data, or Stripe, or Square. This processor receives thousands, maybe millions of transaction requests every second from merchants all over their network. The processor looks at your card number and determines which card network to route the transaction to. Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover. Each network has different routing rules, different fees, different protocols. Let's say it's a Visa card. The processor sends the encrypted transaction to Visa's network, specifically to a system called VisaNet. VisaNet is one of the largest computer networks in the world. It operates data centers on multiple continents, processing approximately 150 million transactions every single day. That's about 1,750 transactions per second, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. VisaNet receives your $4.50 transaction. It validates the format, checks for obvious fraud indicators, and then determines which bank issued your card. Every credit card number encodes the issuing bank in its first 6 digits. VisaNet routes your transaction to that specific bank. Let's say your card was issued by Chase Bank. VisaNet sends an authorization request to Chase's authorization system. Chase's system receives the request. It now has to make a decision in milliseconds. Approve or decline. Chase's computer looks up your account. It checks. Is this card active? Is it reported lost or stolen? Is there sufficient credit available? Does this transaction match your normal spending patterns? Is the merchant legitimate? Are you currently in the location where this transaction is occurring? All of these checks happen simultaneously across multiple systems in fractions of a second. If everything looks good, Chase sends back an approval code. This approval travels back through VisaNet, back to the payment processor, back to the terminal in the coffee shop. The screen displays approved. Total elapsed time, about 2 seconds. But the transaction isn't actually complete. Not yet. When you swiped your card, no money actually moved. Not yet. What happened was authorization. Chase promised to pay the coffee shop $4.50. But the actual transfer of funds happens later, in a process called settlement. At the end of the day, the coffee shop closes its register. All the transactions from that day, dozens or hundreds of card payments, get bundled together into what's called a batch. This batch file contains all the transaction details: card numbers, amounts, authorization codes, timestamp. The coffee shop sends this batch file to their payment processor, usually overnight. The payment processor receives batch files from thousands of merchants. A grocery store's batch might contain 10,000 transactions totaling $200,000. A gas station's batch might contain 5,000 transactions totaling $75,000. The processor sorts all these transactions by card network, then by issuing bank. Your $4.50 coffee transaction gets bundled with thousands of other Chase Visa transactions. This consolidated batch gets sent to Visa for clearing. Clearing is the process of calculating who owes what to whom. Visa's clearing system takes all the transactions from all the processors, sorts them by issuing bank and acquiring bank, and calculates the net positions. Let's say Chase customers spent $5 million at merchants who bank with Wells Fargo, but Wells Fargo customers spent $3 million at merchants who bank with Chase. The net position is Chase owes Wells Fargo $2 million. This netting happens across hundreds of banks, thousands of processors, millions of transactions. The calculations are staggeringly complex. Once the net positions are calculated, Visa sends instructions to the banks. Chase, you owe $2 million to Wells Fargo. Bank of America, you owe $5 million to Citibank. Settlement is when the actual money moves. But how does Chase send $2 million to Wells Fargo? They don't mail a check. They don't wire it directly. They use something much larger, much more fundamental. They use the Federal Reserve. Every major bank in the United States has an account at the Federal Reserve. These accounts work just like your checking account, except they hold billions of dollars instead of thousands. Chase instructs the Federal Reserve to debit $2 million from Chase's Fed account and credit it to Wells Fargo's Fed account. The Federal Reserve makes this entry in its ledger. The money moves. This entire process, from your swipe to the final settlement, takes about 1 to 3 days. Your $4.50 coffee purchase becomes real money in the coffee shop's bank account approximately 48 hours after you bought it. But we're still just talking about one transaction. One person buying one coffee. The scale is about to explode. That coffee shop you bought from. Let's say it's a small independent shop, maybe 20 customers per hour during busy times. If half of them pay with cards, that's about 100 card transactions per day. 100 transactions. Let's say the average transaction is $6. That's $600 per day in card payments. About $4,200 per week. Roughly $220,000 per year. Now let's zoom out to a Starbucks location. A busy Starbucks might serve 500 to 1,000 customers per day. Maybe 75% pay with cards. That's roughly 750 card transactions per day at a single location. 750 transactions. Average ticket may be $7. That's $5,250 per day in card payments. About $1.9 million per year. Starbucks has approximately 33,000 locations globally. If we assume an average of 500 card transactions per location per day, that's 16.5 million card transactions. Every single day. Just from Starbucks. 16.5 million transactions. If each transaction takes 2 seconds to authorize, that's 33 million seconds of authorization time, or about 380 days. But all these transactions happen in parallel, simultaneously, across thousands of payment terminals, all hitting the same networks at the same time. Now let's look at a grocery store chain. A large supermarket might process 2,000 card transactions per day. Kroger, the largest supermarket chain in the U.S., operates about 2,800 stores. That's roughly 5.6 million transactions per day. Add up all the coffee shops, all the grocery stores, all the gas stations, all the restaurants, all the retail stores, every business that accepts card payments. In the United States alone, approximately 174 billion card transactions occur every year. That's about 477 million transactions per day. 477 million transactions per day. If you tried to count to 477 million, counting one number per second without stopping, it would take you about 15 years. But we're still just talking about card payments in one country. We haven't discussed wire transfers, ACH payments, international transactions, interbank settlements, the truly massive flows of money that most people never see. The scale is about to shift dramatically. Visa and MasterCard aren't banks. Most people don't realize this. They don't issue cards. They don't lend monies. They don't take deposits. What they do is operate networks. Payment networks that connect thousands of banks, millions of merchants, billions of cardholders. Let's understand the scale of these networks. Visa operates in over 200 countries and territories. It connects more than 16,000 financial institutions. It enables payments at over 100 million merchant locations globally. Visa processes approximately 250 billion transactions per year. That's about 685 million transactions per day. About 7,900 transactions per second. 7,900 transactions per second. Every second of every day. The data centers that handle this volume are massive. Visa operates multiple facilities, including a primary data center in Ashburn, Virginia, and backup centers in other locations. Each facility contains thousands of servers, connected by networks capable of moving petabytes of data. 1 petabyte is 1 million gigabytes. If you stored a petabyte of data on DVDs, you'd need about 223,000 DVDs. The stack would be about 900 feet tall. VisaNet can handle over 65,000 transaction messages per second, though its average load is much lower. It maintains a guaranteed uptime of 99.999%. That's what's called 5 nines reliability. It means the system can only be down for about 5 minutes per year. 5 minutes total for the entire year. To achieve this, VisaNet is designed with massive redundancy. Every transaction is processed by multiple servers simultaneously. Every piece of data is stored in multiple locations. If one data center goes offline, the others take over seamlessly. The network routes transactions based on real-time conditions. If one path is congested, transactions automatically route through alternative paths. It's like having a highway system where the roads can instantly reconfigure themselves to avoid traffic jams. MasterCard operates a similar network. It processes approximately 100 billion transactions per year, about 274 million per day, about 3,200 per second. Combined, Visa and MasterCard handle approximately 350 billion transactions annually. That's almost 1 trillion transactions every 3 years. If you tried to count to 350 billion, counting one number per second, it would take you approximately 11,000 years. Civilization has only existed for about 6,000 years. You'd have to start counting before the invention of writing, and you'd still be counting today. But here's what's remarkable: the total value processed. Visa processed approximately $14.5 trillion in payment volume in 2023. MasterCard processed about $8 trillion. Combined, approximately $22.5 trillion. That's larger than the GDP of the United States, larger than the GDP of China. These two networks alone move more money in a year than the entire economic output of any single country on Earth. But Visa and MasterCard are just two networks. There are others: American Express, Discover, UnionPay in China, RuPay in India, dozens of regional networks. And card networks are just one layer of the payment system. Beneath them, supporting them, are even larger systems. Systems that move money between banks. Systems that settle accounts. Systems that most people have never heard of. We're about to go deeper. While you're tapping your card to buy coffee, a much larger, much quieter payment system is moving money in the background. It's called ACH, the Automated Clearing House. Most people have never heard of ACH, but you use it constantly. When your employer deposits your paycheck into your bank account, that's ACH. When you set up automatic bill payments for your utilities, Ledge. When you transfer money between your checking and savings accounts at different banks, Ledge. ACH is the plumbing of the American banking system. It's how banks move money between each other for routine, non-urgent transactions. Let's understand how it works. When your employer processes payroll, they don't send individual payments to each employee's bank. Instead, they create a batch file containing all the payment instructions. Send $5,000 to John Smith's account at Chase. Send $6,000 to Jane Doe's account at Bank of America. This batch file gets sent to the employer's bank. The bank forwards it to one of two ACH operators, either the Federal Reserve or a private company called the clearinghouse. These ACH operators receive batch files from thousands of banks throughout the day. They sort all the payment instructions, determine which bank needs to receive money and which needs to send it, and calculate the net positions. Just like with card settlements, if Chase owes Wells Fargo $10 million, but Wells Fargo owes Chase $8 million, the net position is Chase owes Wells Fargo $2 million. One transaction instead of millions. ACH settlements happen overnight. The actual money moves through Federal Reserve accounts, just like card settlements. Now here's the scale. ACH processes approximately 30 billion transactions per year in the United States. That's about 82 million transactions per day. 82 million ACH transactions every single day, moving money for payroll, bill payments, government benefits, tax refunds, business-to-business payments. The total value, approximately $76 trillion per year. $76 trillion. That's more than 3 times the U.S. GDP. That's more than Visa and MasterCard combined, multiplied by 3. But ACH moves slowly by design. Most ACH payments take 1 to 3 business days to settle. It's a batch system, designed for predictability and low cost, not for speed. When you need to move money fast, when you need guaranteed same-day settlement, you use a different system. A system that operates in real time, that moves money instantly, that handles the largest transactions in the economy. You use Fedwire. Fedwire is operated by the Federal Reserve. It's a real-time gross settlement system, meaning every transaction settles individually and immediately. No batching, no netting, no waiting until tomorrow. When you send a Fedwire transfer, the money moves instantly from one bank's Federal Reserve account to another bank's Federal Reserve account. Fedwire is how banks move large amounts of money. When a corporation needs to pay $100 million to acquire another company. Fedwire. When a hedge fund needs to settle $1 billion securities trade. Fedwire. When the Treasury Department auctions government bonds and needs to collect payments from major banks. Fedwire. Let's understand the scale. Fedwire processes approximately 200 million transactions per year. That's about 600,000 transactions per day, processed during the business hours when Fedwire is open, roughly 9 hours per day on weekdays. 600,000 transactions per day might sound small compared to ACH's 82 million or Visa's 685 million. But look at the average transaction size. The average Fedwire transaction is about $5 million. $5 million per transaction. The total daily volume through Fedwire is approximately $3 trillion. $3 trillion every day. Let me repeat that because it's almost impossible to comprehend. The Federal Reserve's Fedwire system moves approximately $3 trillion every single business day. If you laid $3 trillion in $1 bills end to end, you'd create a line about 285 million miles long. That's enough to reach from Earth to the Sun, then back to Earth, then halfway back to the Sun again. And this happens every day. Over the course of a year, Fedwire moves approximately $750 trillion. $750 trillion. That's about 7 times the entire global GDP. That's more than 30 times the value processed by Visa and MasterCard combined. This is the real payment system. This is where the actual money in the economy moves. Your coffee purchases, your paycheck, your mortgage payment, they're tiny ripples on the surface. The massive flows, the transfers that keep banks functioning, that settle securities trades, that enable corporate acquisitions, that fund government operations, all of this moves through Fedwire. But Fedwire only operates during business hours. About 9 hours per day, 5 days per week. What happens when Fedwire is closed? Banks still need to move money. Securities trades still need to settle. International transactions still happen. For this, there's another system, operated by the private sector, that runs 24/7. It's called CHIPS, the Clearinghouse Interbank Payment System. CHIPS is operated by the Clearinghouse, a banking association owned by the largest banks in America. It was established in 1970, actually predating Fedwire in its modern form, to enable banks to settle large value payments between themselves. CHIPS works differently than Fedwire. Instead of settling each transaction immediately, CHIPS accumulates transactions throughout the day and settles them in batches. But multiple times per day, not just once overnight like ACH. This allows banks to net their positions, reducing the actual amount of money that needs to move. If Bank A owes Bank B $1 billion in accumulated transactions, but Bank B owes Bank A $900 million, the net settlement is only $100 million. This netting is crucial for liquidity management. Banks don't need to hold as much cash in their Federal Reserve accounts if they can net their positions throughout the day. CHIPS processes approximately 500,000 transactions per day. The average transaction size is about $3.5 million. The total daily volume through CHIPS is approximately $1.8 trillion. $1.8 trillion per day. About $450 trillion per year. Add Fedwire and CHIPS together, and you get about $1.2 quadrillion in annual payment volume. $1.2 quadrillion. If you tried to count to 1.2 quadrillion, counting one number per second, it would take you approximately 38 million years. That's longer than the entire time that primates have existed on Earth. But we're still only talking about domestic U.S. payment systems. We haven't discussed international payments, currency conversions, cross-border settlements, the systems that connect every banking system on Earth into a single global network. This is where it gets truly massive. When you send money internationally, when a business pays a supplier in another country, when an investor buys foreign stocks, the banks need a way to communicate. They need to send payment instructions, confirm account details, verify identities. This communication happens through SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. SWIFT isn't a payment system in the traditional sense. It doesn't move money. It doesn't hold accounts. What it does is transmit messages between banks. Think of it as a highly secure messaging network. When Bank of America wants to send $1 million to Deutsche Bank in Germany, it sends a SWIFT message containing the payment instructions. Deutsche Bank receives the message, verifies it, and credits the recipient's account. The actual money moves through correspondent banking relationships, which we'll discuss in a moment. SWIFT was established in 1973 by 239 banks from 15 countries. Today, it connects more than 11,000 financial institutions in over 200 countries. 11,000 institutions. Every major bank on Earth, every brokerage, every securities firm, all connected through this single network. SWIFT processes approximately 42 million messages per day. 42 million messages. Each message represents a payment instruction, a confirmation, a query, a status update. Each one encrypted, authenticated, routed through SWIFT's secure network. Over the course of a year, that's approximately 11 billion messages. But here's what's crucial to understand. SWIFT doesn't just facilitate routine payments. It's the communication backbone for the entire global financial system. When central banks intervene in currency markets, they coordinate through SWIFT. When international securities trades settle, the instructions flow through SWIFT. When letters of credit are issued for international trade, SWIFT. The total value of transactions coordinated through SWIFT messages is approximately $5 trillion per day. $5 trillion per day. That's about $1.3 quadrillion per year. But SWIFT is just the messaging layer. The actual money still needs to move. And this is where the correspondent banking system comes in. Here's a question most people never think about. How does a bank in Japan send money to a bank in Brazil? They don't have accounts with each other. They might not even know each other exists. They operate under different regulations, in different time zones, using different currencies. The answer is correspondent banking. Correspondent banking is a system of relationships between banks that allows them to access financial services in foreign jurisdictions. It's like having a friend in a foreign country who can handle transactions for you. Here's how it works. Let's say you're a small business in Brazil and you need to pay a supplier in Japan. You instruct your Brazilian bank to send $1 million to the supplier's Japanese bank. Your Brazilian bank doesn't have a direct relationship with the Japanese bank. But your Brazilian bank has a correspondent banking relationship with a large international bank. Let's say JP Morgan Chase. Your Brazilian bank sends a SWIFT message to Chase instructing them to pay $1 million to the Japanese supplier. Your bank also transfers $1 million from their account at the Brazilian central bank to their account at Chase. Chase receives the instruction. Chase has a correspondent relationship with a large Japanese bank. Let's say Mitsubishi UFJ. Chase sends a SWIFT message to Mitsubishi instructing them to pay the supplier. Chase also credits Mitsubishi's account at Chase with $1 million. Mitsubishi receives the instruction and credits the supplier's account with the equivalent amount in yen, based on the current exchange rate. The payment is complete. But notice what happened. The actual money didn't travel from Brazil to Japan. It moved between accounts at Chase, one of the world's largest correspondent banks. This is the architecture of international banking, a network of correspondent relationships centered on a few dozen major international banks that enables thousands of smaller banks to conduct international transactions. The largest correspondent banks include JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, HSBC, Deutsche Bank, BNP Paribas, Standard Chartered. These banks maintain accounts for hundreds or thousands of other banks around the world. Citibank alone has correspondent banking relationships with over 4,000 financial institutions globally. It processes approximately $3 trillion in correspondent banking flows every single day. $3 trillion per day. Just one bank, facilitating international payments for thousands of other banks. Multiply this across all the major correspondent banks, and you start to understand the scale of international payment flows. But correspondent banking has a problem. It's slow, it's expensive, and it's opaque. A payment from Brazil to Japan might take 3 to 5 business days to complete. It might pass through 2 or 3 correspondent banks, each taking a fee. The sender often has no visibility into where the payment is in the process. This has led to the development of new systems, vaster systems, real-time international payment systems, systems that are changing how money moves across borders. For decades, domestic payments were slow. ACH took days. Checks took longer. If you needed to pay someone urgently, you had limited options. But over the past decade, a revolution has occurred. Real-time payment systems have emerged in countries around the world, allowing instant money transfers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. India's UPI, Unified Payments Interface, launched in 2016. It allows instant bank-to-bank transfers using just a phone number or a UPI ID. The adoption has been staggering. In 2023, UPI processed approximately 117 billion transactions. 117 billion transactions. In one country. In 1 year. That's about 320 million transactions per day. That's more than Visa processes globally. The total value moved through UPI in 2023 was approximately $2 trillion. And this is just peer-to-peer and merchant payments, not large institutional transfers. China's payment systems are even larger. Alipay and WeChat Pay, operated by private companies but integrated with the banking system, process over 200 billion transactions per year combined. 200 billion transactions. If you tried to count that high, counting one per second, it would take you over 6,300 years. In the United States, the clearinghouse launched RTP, the Real-Time Payments Network, in 2017. The Federal Reserve is rolling out its own real-time payment system called FedNow. These systems are still small compared to India or China, but they are growing rapidly. They represent a fundamental shift in how payment infrastructure works. Instead of batching transactions and settling them once or twice a day, these systems settle continuously. Instead of limiting operating hours, they run around the clock. Instead of taking days, payments complete in seconds. But all of these systems are domestic. They move money within a single country. When you need to move money internationally, you still need correspondent banks, SWIFT messages, multiple intermediaries. Unless you use the ultimate layer, the system that settles payments between countries, the system that most people have never heard of, but that underpins all international commerce. It's called CLS, Continuous Linked Settlement. CLS was established in 2002 to solve a critical problem in international payments: settlement risk. When you trade currencies, you face a timing problem. Let's say a US bank wants to buy euros from a European bank. The US bank needs to send dollars, and the European bank needs to send euros. But if the US bank sends dollars first, there's a risk the European bank won't send the euros, and vice versa. This is called settlement risk, or Herstatt risk, named after a German bank that failed in 1974 while in the middle of currency settlements, leaving its counterparties with massive losses. CLS eliminates this risk through simultaneous settlement. Both sides of a currency trade settle at exactly the same time, in a single instant, so neither party has exposure to the other. Here's how it works. CLS operates accounts at central banks around the world. It has an account at the Federal Reserve for dollars, at the European Central Bank for euros, at the Bank of England for pounds, and so on for 18 different currencies. When two banks agree to trade currencies, they submit the trade details to CLS. Let's say Bank A is selling $100 million to Bank B in exchange for 90 million euros. Bank A transfers $100 million from its account at the Federal Reserve to CLS's account at the Fed. Bank B transfers 90 million euros from its account at the ECB to CLS's account at the ECB. Once CLS has received both currencies, it simultaneously credits Bank B's CLS account with dollars and Bank A's CLS account with euros. Both sides settle at the exact same instant. The banks then withdraw their newly acquired currencies from CLS. Bank B withdraws the dollars from CLS's Fed account to its own Fed account. Bank A withdraws the euros from CLS's ECB account to its own ECB account. The trade is complete, with zero settlement risk. CLS processes approximately 1.5 million currency trades per day. 1.5 million trades, each one representing an exchange between two currencies, often in amounts of millions or billions of dollars. The total value settled through CLS is approximately $6 trillion per day. $6 trillion every day. Over the course of a year, that's about $1.5 quadrillion in currency settlements. $1.5 quadrillion. That's about 14 times the global GDP. CLS is the ultimate backstop of the global financial system. It's what makes international trade possible at scale. It's what allows banks to trade currencies worth trillions of dollars without fear that the other side won't deliver. And almost nobody knows it exists. Let's add it all up. Let's take everything we've discussed and understand the total scale of global payment systems. Card networks like Visa and MasterCard, approximately $22.5 trillion per year. ACH in the United States, approximately $76 trillion per year. Fedwire, approximately $750 trillion per year. JIBS, approximately $450 trillion per year. International payments coordinated through SWIFT, approximately $1.3 quadrillion per year. CLS currency settlement, approximately $1.5 quadrillion per year. And this is just what we can measure. It doesn't include all the domestic payment systems in other countries, the real-time system, the securities settlement system, the central bank operations. When you add everything together, the total value of payments flowing through global payment systems is approximately $5 quadrillion per year. $5 quadrillion. If you tried to count to 5 quadrillion, counting one number per second without stopping, It would take you approximately 158 million years. That's longer than mammals have existed on Earth. If you had $5 quadrillion in $1 bills, the stack would reach approximately 342 million miles into space. That's enough to build a bridge of dollar bills from Earth to the Sun and back, with enough left over to make the trip a third time. $5 quadrillion moving through payment systems every year. That's about 50 times the entire global GDP. Why is it so much larger than GDP? Because most of these payments aren't buying goods and services. They're settling financial transactions. A stock trade, a currency exchange, a bond settlement, a derivative contract. The same dollar might be part of dozens of transactions in a single day as it moves through the financial system. This is the hidden machinery of modern civilization. $5 quadrillion flowing through networks, through fiber optic cables, through data centers, through central bank accounts, enabling every transaction, every trade, every payment in the global economy. And it runs invisibly, quietly, in the background, while you tap your card to buy coffee. Payment systems aren't abstract. They are physical. They exist in massive data centers, connected by cables, powered by generators, cooled by industrial air conditioning systems. Let's talk about where these systems actually lie. Visa's primary data center in Ashburn, Virginia occupies approximately 140,000 square feet. That's about 3 football fields worth of computer infrastructure. Inside are thousands of servers, arranged in rows, each one processing transactions, checking for fraud, routing messages, storing data. The facility has redundant power systems, multiple connections to the electrical grid, massive diesel generators that can power the entire facility for days if the grid fails, battery systems that provide instant backup power while the generators start up. Cooling is a major challenge. All these servers generate enormous amounts of heat. The facility uses industrial-scale air conditioning systems that pump thousands of gallons of chilled water through the building every minute. Security is intense. Multiple layers of physical barriers, armed guards, biometric scanners, man-trap doors that prevent tailgating. The servers themselves are in locked cages within locked rooms within locked buildings. And this is just one of Visa's facilities. They operate multiple data centers around the world, each one capable of handling the full global transaction load if the others fail. The Federal Reserve operates its Fedwire system from data centers in Richmond, Virginia, and East Rutherford, New Jersey. These facilities are hardened against physical attacks, natural disasters, electromagnetic pulses. They can operate completely independently if communication with the outside world is cut off. SWIFT operates data centers in the Netherlands, Switzerland, and the United States. Each one is designed to withstand military-grade attacks. They are essentially fortresses filled with computers. But the most critical infrastructure isn't the data centers themselves. It's the networks that connect them. These payment systems are connected by dedicated fiber optic cables, separate from the public internet. Multiple redundant paths between facilities. If one cable is cut, traffic instantly reroutes through alternative paths. The cables themselves are buried underground or run along the ocean floor for international connections. They are armored, protected, monitored continuously for any signs of damage or interference. Between New York and London, There are multiple undersea cables dedicated to financial traffic. The fastest of these can transmit data with a round-trip latency of about 59 milliseconds. 59 milliseconds. That's how long it takes for a payment instruction to travel from New York to London and back. This speed matters enormously for high-frequency trading, but it also matters for the stability of international payment systems. The faster you can confirm a payment, the less risk you have in the interim. The total cost of this infrastructure is staggering. Visa spends approximately $1.5 billion per year on technology and operations. The Federal Reserve spends hundreds of millions maintaining FedWire. SWIFT annual operating budget exceeds $1 billion. This is what it costs to move $5 quadrillion per year. Billions of dollars in data centers, cables, security, power, cooling, maintenance. And all of it has to work flawlessly, 24/7, because when payment systems fail, the economy stops. On June 1st, 2018, Visa's payment processing network experienced a hardware failure. For several hours, Visa card transactions across Europe failed. People couldn't buy groceries. They couldn't pay for gas. They couldn't check out of hotels. Merchants who had become dependent on card payments suddenly couldn't accept the primary form of payment their customers used. The failure lasted about 6 hours. During that time, Visa was unable to process approximately 5 million transactions. The economic impact was immediate and severe. This was just a hardware failure, not a cyber attack, not a natural disaster, just a piece of equipment that stopped working. It revealed something crucial. Modern economies are completely dependent on payment systems functioning perfectly. In 2017, a cyber attack targeted the SWIFT network. Hackers gained access to Bangladesh Bank's SWIFT credentials and sent fraudulent payment instructions, attempting to steal nearly $1 billion from Bangladesh's account at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. They succeeded in stealing $81 million before the attack was discovered. The attack worked because SWIFT is fundamentally a messaging system. If you can send a properly formatted SWIFT message, banks will execute the payment. The security relies on protecting the credentials that allow you to send messages. Since then, hundreds of banks have reported attempted breaches of their SWIFT connections. The system that connects 11,000 financial institutions is under constant attack. In 2021, Colonial Pipeline, a major fuel pipeline in the United States, was hit by ransomware. The attack didn't target the pipeline's operational systems. It targeted their billing and payment systems. Colonial couldn't process payments from customers, so they shut down the entire pipeline. Within days, gas stations across the southeastern United States ran out of fuel. A payment system failure caused a physical supply chain crisis. These incidents reveal the vulnerability at the heart of modern civilization. We've built an economy that runs on invisible digital payment systems. When those systems fail, everything stops. Grocery stores can't sell food. Gas stations can't pump fuel. Hospitals can't collect payment. Employees can't receive paychecks. Cash could theoretically provide a backup, but most people don't carry enough cash for their daily needs. Most businesses don't keep enough cash on hand to operate. ATMs need working payment networks to dispense cash. If the payment systems went down for an extended period, days or weeks, the economy would simply stop functioning. This isn't hypothetical. It's happened on small scales, and it could happen on larger scales. The global payment system, despite its massive scale and redundancy, has critical choke points. SWIFT is one. Almost all international banking communication flows through SWIFT. If SWIFT went down, international payments would cease. Trade would stop. Currency markets would freeze. Yes, there are backup systems. Yes, banks could theoretically communicate directly. But the coordination required would be enormous. Payments that normally take minutes would take days or weeks. The correspondent banking system is another choke point. A handful of major banks, maybe 24 globally, facilitate the majority of international payments. If several of these banks failed simultaneously, the entire system would struggle to function. We saw a preview of this in 2008. When Lehman Brothers failed, it created chaos in payment systems. Lehman was a major counterparty in various payment and settlement systems. Its failure meant thousands of transactions couldn't settle normally. Central banks had to step in, providing emergency liquidity, guaranteeing payments, preventing a complete breakdown. The undersea cable network is another vulnerability. About 99% of international internet traffic, including financial data, travels through undersea cables. There are only a few hundred of these cables globally. They are mapped. They are accessible. They could be physically attacked. In 2022, several undersea cables in the Mediterranean were mysteriously cut. Internet traffic was disrupted. The cause was never definitively determined, though some suspected intentional sabotage. If multiple major cable routes were cut simultaneously, international payment systems would be severely degraded. Transactions that normally take milliseconds would time out. Systems would fail over to slower satellite links. Processing capacity would plummet. The Federal Reserve itself is a choke point for U.S. payments. Almost all major dollar transactions eventually settle through Federal Reserve accounts. If the Fed's systems went down, the U.S. payment system would stop functioning. The Fed has redundancy, backup systems, disaster recovery plans, but they are not invulnerable. These choke points exist because of centralization. We've built payment systems around a small number of critical nodes. This provides efficiency, economies of scale, standardization, but it also creates single points of failure. And in a world of increasing cyber threats, geopolitical tensions, and potential conflicts, these vulnerabilities are concerning. Payment systems aren't just infrastructure. They are power. The ability to exclude someone from payment systems is one of the most potent economic weapons that exists. When the United States wants to sanction a country, it doesn't just freeze assets. It cuts them off from the international payment system. This works because the dollar is the dominant currency for international transactions. Even when two non-US entities trade with each other, they often use dollars. And dollar transactions, almost by definition, have to touch the US financial system at some point. When a sanctioned entity tries to receive dollars, US banks are required to block the transaction. The payment doesn't go through, but it goes deeper. SWIFT, despite being based in Belgium and theoretically independent, complies with U.S. sanctions. When the U.S. sanctions a bank, SWIFT disconnects that bank from its network. This happened to Iranian banks in 2012. Iran was cut off from SWIFT. Iranian banks couldn't send or receive international payments. Iran's oil exports, which required international payments, collapsed. The economic impact was devastating. Iran's economy contracted by about 6%. Inflation soared. The currency collapsed. All because they couldn't access payment systems. In 2022, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, many Russian banks were cut off from SWIFT. Russia's largest banks suddenly couldn't communicate with international financial institutions. Russia has tried to build alternative payment systems. They created SPFS, their own domestic payment messaging system. China has ZIP, the cross-border interbank payment system. These are alternatives to SWIFT and the dollar-dominated payment system. But they are tiny compared to the established systems. SWIFT processes 42 million messages per day globally. SIPS processes about 80,000. It's not a real alternative. Yet, the use of payment systems as geopolitical weapons is driving countries to seek alternatives. Not because the alternatives are better, but because they want to avoid the risk of being cut off. This could fragment the global payment system. Instead of one integrated network, we might end up with competing blocks. Dollar payments through SWIFT, yuan payments through SIPS, digital currency systems operated by various central banks. Fragmentation would reduce efficiency. Payments that currently take seconds might take hours or days. Costs would increase. International trade would become more difficult. But the trend is clear. Payment systems, which were designed to facilitate commerce, have become tools of geopolitical power. And countries that feel vulnerable are building alternatives, even if those alternatives are currently inferior. This is the hidden power behind payment systems. The ability to include or exclude, to enable or prevent transactions, to make economic activity possible or impossible. It's power that most people never think about, but it shapes the world. Every time you swipe your card, someone is paying fees. Multiple someone, actually. Let's trace the economics of that $4.50 coffee purchase. When you tap your card, the coffee shop doesn't receive $4.50. They receive approximately $4.35. Where did the 15 cents go? It's split between several parties. First, the payment processor takes a fee, maybe 2 to 3 cents. They are providing the terminal, the software, the connection to the card networks. They're taking the risk that they'll submit the transaction for settlement but won't get paid. Second, the card network takes a fee. Visa or MasterCard charges what's called a network fee. This might be 1 to 2 cents. They're operating the global network, processing billions of transactions, maintaining the infrastructure. Third, and this is the largest portion, the issuing bank takes what's called interchange. This might be 10 to 12 cents on your $4.50 purchase. Interchange is the fee paid by the merchant's bank to the cardholder's bank. It's supposed to compensate the issuing bank for the costs and risks of maintaining your account, providing credits, handling fraud. But interchange rates vary enormously. They depend on the type of card, the type of merchant, how the transaction is processed, A basic debit card might have an interchange rate of 0.5%. A premium rewards credit card might have an interchange rate of 2.5% or higher. On that 450 coffee, a basic card might generate 2 cents of interchange. A premium card might generate 11 cents. This is why merchants love debit cards and hate premium credit cards. And it's why banks push you to use their premium cards. Higher interchange means more revenue for the issuing bank. No, 15 cents on a 450 purchase might not sound like much. But let's scale it. The United States processes approximately 174 billion card transactions per year. The average transaction is about $55. If the average total merchant fee is about 2%, that's $1.10 per transaction. Multiply by 174 billion transactions, and you get approximately $190 billion in annual payment processing fees in the United States alone. $190 billion. That's more than the GDP of Hungary. That's more than the market capitalization of many Fortune 500 companies. $190 billion extracted from the economy every just to move money from consumers to merchants. Globally, with card payment volumes approaching 350 billion transactions per year, the total fees are approaching $350 billion annually. $350 billion. That's larger than the entire GDP of Denmark or Singapore. And this is just card payments. It doesn't include wire transfer fees, ACH fees, international payment fees, currency conversion spreads. When you send an international wire transfer, you might pay a $40 fee to your bank. The receiving bank might charge $20. If currency conversion is involved, the bank might take a 1 to 3% spread on the exchange rate. Send $1,000 internationally, and you might lose $60 to $90 to fees and spreads. Multiply this across trillions of dollars in annual international payment flows, and the fees are enormous. The payment industry is one of the most profitable sectors in finance. Visa's profit margin is typically above 50%. 50%. For every dollar of revenue, more than 50 cents is profit. This is why payment processing is so valuable. This is why companies fight for market share. This is why new entrants like Square, Stripe, and PayPal have become multi-billion-dollar companies. They're capturing a small slice of the $350 billion in annual payment fees. But the fees aren't evenly distributed. Small merchants pay higher rates than large merchants. Developing countries pay higher international transfer fees than developed countries. A migrant worker sending $200 back to their family in another country might pay $10 to $15 in fees. That's 5 to 7% of the transfer amount. Globally, remittances, money sent by workers to their families in other countries, total about $700 billion per year. The average fee is about 6%. That's $42 billion per year in remittance fees, extracted from some of the poorest people in the world who can least afford it. This is the hidden cost of payment systems. The infrastructure is expensive to build and maintain, but the fees charged far exceed the actual costs. The difference is profit, extracted from every transaction, invisible to most people, accumulating to hundreds of billions of dollars per year. Payment systems are changing faster now than at any time in history. Several forces are driving this transformation. Technological innovation, regulatory pressure, geopolitical competition, and consumer demand for faster, cheaper payments. Real-time payment systems are spreading globally. Countries that historically relied on slow ACH-style systems are implementing instant payment networks. The United States is late to this trend. Europe has had instant payments since 2017 through SEPA Instant Credit Transfer. But adoption is accelerating with the launch of FedNow and the expansion of RTP. Within 5 years, real-time payments could become the norm rather than the exception. The days of waiting 2 to 3 days for payments to clear could be over. Central bank digital currencies, CBDC, are another major trend. Over 100 countries are exploring or developing CBDC. China has already launched a pilot program for the digital yuan, processing billions of yuan in transactions. CBDC are essentially digital versions of cash, issued and backed by central banks. They would allow people to hold central bank money directly, rather than holding commercial bank deposits. This could fundamentally reshape payment system. Instead of card networks and correspondent banks, payments could flow directly through central bank infrastructure. Instantly, with minimal fees. But CBDC raise enormous questions. Privacy concerns, surveillance risks, the potential for government control over individual transactions. If every payment flows through a central bank, the government has complete visibility into everyone's financial activity. They could theoretically block transactions, impose negative interest rates by making digital money expire, or program restrictions into the currency itself. China's digital yuan pilot includes features that allow the government to track transactions and potentially limit what the money can be used for. This isn't theoretical. It's happening now. Cryptocurrency and blockchain-based payment systems represent another alternative. Bitcoin, Ethereum, stablecoins, they promise to enable peer-to-peer payments without intermediaries. So far, they haven't disrupted traditional payment systems significantly. Bitcoin processes about 300,000 transactions per day globally. Visa processes 685 million. But the technology is improving. Layer 2 solutions, like the Lightning Network for Bitcoin, can potentially process millions of transactions per second. Stablecoins, cryptocurrencies pegged to traditional currencies, are being used for cross-border payments, particularly in countries with unstable banking systems. The total value of stablecoin transactions in 2023 was approximately $11 trillion. Still small compared to traditional systems, but growing rapidly. Banks are responding. They're exploring blockchain technology for interbank settlements. JP Morgan has created JPM Coin, a digital token for instant settlement between institutional clients. The volume is already in the hundreds of billions of dollars per year. There's also movement toward open banking and API-based payments. Instead of routing everything through card networks, payments could flow directly from bank to bank through standardized APIs. This is already happening in some jurisdictions. The UK's Open Banking Initiative, Europe's PSD2 regulation, they mandate that banks provide APIs allowing third parties to initiate payments directly. This could reduce or eliminate card network fees. Why pay Visa 2% when you can connect directly to the banking system? But there are trade-offs. Card networks provide value, fraud protection, dispute resolution, guaranteed payments, rewards programs. Direct bank transfers don't necessarily include these features. The future of payment systems is uncertain. Multiple technologies, multiple regulatory approaches, multiple geopolitical interests are all pushing in different directions. What seems certain is that change is coming. The systems we've built over the past 50 years, SWIFT, correspondent banking, card networks, they won't necessarily be the systems we use 50 years from now. But whatever replaces them will need to handle the same fundamental challenge. Moving $5 quadrillion per year, instantly, securely, reliably, at scale. That's not an easy problem to solve. There's one aspect of payment systems we haven't discussed yet, but it's crucial. Fraud detection. Every second, payment networks are analyzing transactions for signs of fraud. And the scale of this operation is staggering. Visa's fraud detection system analyzes every transaction, all 685 million per day, in real time. It's looking for patterns, anomalies, indicators that something is wrong. Is this card being used in a location far from the cardholder's normal location? Has it made an unusually large purchase? Is it being used at a merchant type that's unusual for this cardholder? Are there multiple small transactions in quick succession, which might indicate a stolen card being tested? The system doesn't just look at individual transactions. It looks at patterns across millions of transactions. It identifies fraud rings, networks of criminals using stolen cards or creating fake cards. It uses machine learning models trained on billions of historical transactions. The models can identify fraud patterns that humans would never notice. The accuracy is remarkable. Visa's fraud rate is approximately 0.1%. For every $1,000 processed, only about $1 is fraudulent. That might not sound impressive until you consider the volume. $14.5 trillion per year means approximately $14.5 billion in fraud. But without fraud detection systems, the fraud rate would be much higher. Industry estimates suggest fraud could reach 5 to 10% of transaction volume without active prevention. At 5%, that would be $725 billion in annual fraud on Visa's network alone. The fraud detection systems are preventing hundreds of billions of dollars in losses every year. And they are doing it invisibly. Most legitimate transactions are approved in milliseconds without any human involvement. The system is analyzing, scoring, deciding, all faster than you can blink. Only when something looks suspicious does the system intervene. Maybe it declines the transaction. Maybe it requires additional verification. Maybe it flags it for manual review. This intelligence layer, this invisible guardian analyzing every transaction, is one of the most sophisticated applications of machine learning in the world. And it has to work perfectly. If it's too aggressive, it declines legitimate transactions, frustrating customers. If it's too lenient, it allows fraud, costing banks billions. The balance is delicate, and the stakes are enormous. Let's step back and consider what we've learned. We started with a $4.50 coffee purchase. A tap of a card. 2 seconds. Simple. But in those 2 seconds, we triggered a cascade across one of the most complex systems ever built. Your card terminal communicated with a payment processor. The processor routed the transaction to Visa's network. Visa Net validated the transaction and sent it to your bank. Your bank checked your account, ran fraud detection, and approved the payment. The approval traveled back through the same chain. Later that day, the coffee shop's transactions were batched and sent for clearing. Visa calculated the net positions between thousands of banks. The Federal Reserve moved money between bank accounts to settle the obligations. All to move $4.50 from your account to the coffee shop's account. But this simple transaction is supported by infrastructure that processes $5 quadrillion per year. $5 quadrillion flowing through Visa and MasterCard's networks processing billions of transactions. ACH moving $76 trillion in routine payments. Fedwire and chips handling over $1 trillion per day in large value transfers. SWIFT coordinating international payments worth trillions daily. CLS settling currency trades worth $6 trillion per day. Correspondent banks facilitating cross-border flows. Real-time payment systems processing hundreds of millions of instant transfers. All of this hidden. All of this invisible. All of this running in the background while you live your life. Buy your coffee, pay your bills, send money to friends. The infrastructure cost billions of dollars to build. It costs billions more to maintain. Data centers consuming enough electricity to power cities. Undersea cables spanning oceans. Redundant systems ensuring 5/9's reliability. Security teams defending against constant cyber attacks. And it generates hundreds of billions of dollars in annual fees, extracted from every transaction, mostly invisible to the people paying them. This is modern civilization's circulatory system. Money flowing through digital networks instead of physical transport. Payments settling in seconds instead of weeks. Global commerce enabled by a web of interconnected systems, each one dependent on the others, all of them running continuously, never stopping. And most people have no idea it exists. Here's what strikes me most about payment systems. They work so well that we don't think about them. You tap your card. It works. You assume it will work. You've internalized this assumption so deeply that you don't carry much cash anymore. Why would you? Cards work everywhere. But this creates a paradox. The better payment systems work, the more dependent we become on them. And the more dependent we are, the more catastrophic it would be if they failed. We've built an economy that cannot function without digital payments. Grocery stores don't keep enough cash to operate on cash alone. Gas stations can't pump fuel without processing card payments. Employers pay via direct deposit, which requires ACH. Rent and mortgages are paid electronically. If payment systems went down for a week, the economy would simply stop. This isn't an exaggeration. In countries that have experienced payment system failure, even temporary ones, the effects are immediate and severe. Commerce ceases. People can't buy food. Businesses can't pay employees. Supply chains break down. Modern society is built on the assumption that payments will always work, that you can always move money from one account to another, that the systems will be there, functioning, reliable. This assumption is mostly valid. Payment systems have extraordinary uptime. Redundancy is built in at every level. Failures are rare and usually brief. But the assumption isn't guaranteed. Systems can fail. Cyber attacks can succeed. Geopolitical conflicts can fragment global networks. Natural disasters can take out critical infrastructure. And we have no backup plan. Cash could theoretically serve as a backup, but cash usage has declined so much that it's not a realistic alternative. Many businesses don't even accept cash anymore. They're card only or digital payment only. We've locked ourselves into dependency on digital payment infrastructure. There's no going back. This is the bargain we've made. Incredible convenience, instant transactions, global connectivity, in exchange for total dependence on systems that we don't control, don't understand, and can't easily replace if they fail. Most of the time, this bargain works out well. Payments are faster and cheaper than they've ever been in history. International commerce operates at a scale that would have been impossible 50 years ago. But the risk is there, hidden, growing as our dependency deepens. Payment systems aren't neutral infrastructure. They are power structures. The entities that control payment systems, Visa, MasterCard, major banks, SWIFT, central bank, they have enormous power. They can include or exclude. They can enable transactions or block them. They can see every payment, analyze every pattern, build detailed profiles of everyone's financial activity. This power is mostly exercised responsibly. Payment systems want to be inclusive, want to facilitate commerce, want to grow their networks. Blocking transactions is bad for business. But the power exists. Banks can close your account and refuse to tell you why. Card networks can refuse to process payments for certain types of businesses. SWIFT can disconnect entire countries from the international financial system. When this power is used for good purposes, fighting terrorism financing, preventing money laundering, enforcing sanctions against aggressive regime, most people support it. But the same mechanisms can be used for other purposes. Surveillance, political control, economic coercion. China's digital payment system, Alipay and WeChat Pay, are integrated with the government's social credit system. Your payment history can affect your social credit score, which can affect your ability to travel, get loans, access certain services. This isn't theoretical. It's happening now. Western payment systems aren't integrated with social credit systems, but they do collect enormous amounts of data. They do share that data with governments under certain circumstances. They do have the technical capability to implement similar controls if required to by law. The architecture is there. The question is how it gets used. As payment systems become more digital, more centralized, more controlled by a small number of entities, this question becomes more important. CBDC would take this even further. If all money is held directly at the central bank, the government has complete visibility and control. They can see every transaction. They can block transactions in real time. They can impose expiration dates on money, forcing people to spend rather than save. Some people see this as a feature. Better government oversight, better enforcement of laws, better macroeconomic control. Others see it as dystopian, complete financial surveillance, the end of financial privacy, the potential for authoritarian control over daily life. Both perspectives have merit. The technology is neutral, but the implementation matters enormously. As payment systems evolve, as they become more capable, more centralized, more powerful, we need to think carefully about governance, about oversight, about the balance between efficiency and freedom. Because once these systems are built, once everyone depends on them, changing them becomes very difficult. So what does this mean for you? Every time you make a payment, you're participating in this global system. Your 450 coffee purchase is a tiny thread in a fabric that spans the entire world. You're trusting that the terminal will work. The network will route your transaction correctly. Your bank will approve it. The settlement will happen properly. The coffee shop will receive payment. The system will protect your information from fraud. Most of the time, this trust is warranted. The systems work. But understanding what's happening beneath the surface, understanding the infrastructure that makes your daily transactions possible, gives you perspective. When your card is declined, you now know it might be fraud detection protecting you. When an international transfer takes days, you understand it's moving through correspondent banks and currency settlements. When you see news about SWIFT sanctions, you understand what that actually means. You also understand the fragility, how dependent we are on systems that could fail, how much power is concentrated in payment networks, how your financial data is collected and analyzed. This knowledge gives you agency. You can make informed decisions about payment methods. Maybe you keep some cash as a backup. Maybe you diversify across payment systems. Maybe you pay attention to privacy policies. Maybe you support regulations that protect consumers and ensure competition. You can also appreciate the engineering achievement. $5 quadrillion moving through digital networks every billions of transactions processing flawlessly. Fraud detection preventing hundreds of billions in losses. Global commerce enabled at a scale impossible a generation ago. This is one of the most complex systems humans have ever built. And it works. Not perfectly. There are fees. There are failures. There are vulnerabilities. But compared to what came before, compared to physical cash and paper checks and bank transfers that took weeks, modern payment systems are remarkable. We've journeyed from a coffee shop card terminal to the global payment infrastructure. From $4.50 to $5 quadrillion per year. From 2 seconds of authorization to systems operating continuously, processing transactions around the clock, settling obligations between thousands of banks, moving money across borders and currencies. The scale is incomprehensible. $5 quadrillion. If you counted to that number, 1 per second, it would take 158 million years. But the scale isn't the most important thing. What's important is understanding that this infrastructure exists, that it's invisible, that it works, that we depend on it completely. When you tap your card tomorrow, you'll know what's really happening. You'll understand the cascade of communications, the fraud checks, the routing through global networks, the settlement through central bank accounts. You'll appreciate the engineering, the redundancy, the security, the speed. And you'll understand the power dynamics. Who controls these systems? What they can do? What risks we face by depending on them? This is the hidden infrastructure of modern civilization. The systems you never see but use constantly. the networks that make everything else possible. $5 quadrillion, billions of transactions, thousands of institutions, all connected, all interdependent, all invisible to the people whose lives depend on them. Until now. Thank you for taking this journey with me. If you found this exploration valuable, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to keep making content like this. And remember, the next time you buy coffee, you're not just making a simple purchase. You're participating in one of the most complex systems ever built. A system that moves more money in a year than the entire global economy produces. You're part of the invisible network that makes modern life possible. Small in the grand scheme of things, but infinitely connected to everything else. Sleep well, knowing that while you rest, $5 trillion is moving through payment systems around the world. Processing, settling, enabling commerce on every continent. The machinery never stops. The networks never sleep. The invisible infrastructure just keeps running, moving money, settling accounts, making the modern economy possible. And you now understand how it works.